There's a lot of like civil instability there because, you know, you're having protests and then police are here and this and that. It's just very chaotic. Where, you know, when you come back to China and there's a lot of organization here, and, you know, I mean, like I was on the bund this morning, you know, just walking around early in the morning, just kind of getting ready for my day of media interviews, and you know, but you just see, you know, 50 elderly people on the side of the bund with the Chinese music and doing Tai Chi. And it's just so peaceful to watch them. I just sat there, just watched them for like 5 minutes because I'm like, you know, this is just so beautiful. Because I think for a lot of Americans, they would not, again, like we tend to kind of, you know, demonize a country and say like, China's bad, you know, it's communist. And then, but all of a sudden, like if I could just bring you to the bund and just show you like, here's 50 Chinese people at 6 in the morning, you know, doing Tai Chi, you know, with the sun rising up. And and you can just kind of see how happy they are.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Roughly Chinese. I'm your host Mimi.
And I am Yunpeng.
And we have a very special guest.
I'm Cyrus.
Cyrus, I know everybody already knows who you are, but can you please introduce yourself briefly?
Absolutely. My name is Cyrus Jansen. I've lived in China for over 10 years. I've been traveling to China for over 20 years now, and we run one of the largest geopolitical YouTube channels in the world. We love talking about China, Russia, all of the main conflicts and interesting stories around the world, but it's so important for me to come back to China every summer to see how fast this country's developing, to share some stories, and most importantly, help more people around the world understand China. So very honored to be here in Shanghai and certainly with the Wave Media team.
Yay!
We are very honored to have you.
Yes, you really do it so well, and you've been doing it for so long.
Yeah.
I feel like the rest of the world is catching up right now. You know, they're getting on board, they're admiring China, they're understanding China's stories, and I think you have played a very pivotal part in that. So we thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the kind words.
Of course. So we like to kick off our program by looking at some memes and what people are saying on the internet, and I personally do that in my free time anyway.
Love it.
But I've been really enjoying the China maxing phenomenon because it's something I personally never expected to come.
Right.
So we're going to look at one of my favorite tweets that I've saved for a while now. And it says, I'm not asking you to become Chinese. I'm saying when the time is right, you will look in the mirror and already be Chinese. So what does this mean?
That's a good meme. I mean, that's a good quote. I mean, I think what we're seeing right now we're talking about this China maxing is a lot of people in the West are becoming much more curious about China. And so they're starting to embrace these very simple things from daily life. Just something as simple as, you know, in China, we don't typically drink cold drinks, right? It's always viewed as something not good for your system. Even for myself, I actually don't enjoy anything cold. I like minus a cold beer maybe, but you know, definitely water. I don't like ice water. I always like a room temperature water. Even my favorite drink in the morning is a hot water with a little bit of lemon in it. You know, so definitely the influence from my China days. And I think it's a lot of people just, you know, starting to realize, you know, a lot of pieces coming from China. You know, maybe it's doing some Tai Chi in the morning. Maybe it's just, you know, embracing your roots a little bit. I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of, it's a very interesting little meme there. But I think it's definitely the main takeaway here is that China is becoming a lot more popular around the world. And that has been growing so much on social media. It's pretty awesome to see.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you've seen anything like China maxing on social media, and what's your first reaction?
Well, I think kind of what I've seen really shift a lot in the last 2 years is China really opening up to the world. And you know, we talk about one of the best decisions from the Chinese government was really opening up the visa-free policy for a lot of foreigners around the world. I remember being in Guangzhou last summer, and there was a group of Aussies that were standing on the side of the street. These six guys, and you know they had actually like a map with them, and I was like, wow, like what are these guys doing with like an actual like road map? Yeah, like actual physical map, and they're like, hey mate, you know we're lost here, and I was like, hey, I'm just curious, like what are you guys doing in China? And they're like, hey, Australia just became visa free, so we're like, let's go. And we just booked a ticket the next week, and we're here, and we have no idea what we're doing. And I'm like, that's amazing. That sounds awesome. But it shows you how curious people around the world are to China. The fact that, you know, if a country immediately comes visa free, 6 guys are like, dude, let's do a road trip. Like let's do a boys trip to China and go see what we can get up to. And actually, it was really fun. Is I was coming out of one of those 24-hour spas. And so I was like, do you guys know what this is right here? And they're like, no idea. I'm like,
It's going to change your life.
It's going to change your life. I was like, you guys got to go right into this building. It's called Yoma. It is one of the best 24-hour spas. And I literally walked him in, and I was just like, off you go, mates. You know, like, go have it. I was, yeah. And they were just, because they're like, yeah, we have no plans. We're just going to like kind of hang out in Guangzhou. We got a direct flight from wherever they were. And so I think that was the first thing that I saw, is just this people are always curious about China, you know, and they've always been. Like, China is always a hot topic. It doesn't matter what time of year, doesn't matter what's going on. People always have an interest in China.
Yeah. It's funny because, you know, I grew up in Australia, and Australia is actually geographically quite close. I mean, way closer than to Europe or to the United States. And I have found that people are curious about China, but the curiosity has shifted in nature. Whereas before it was like this, like, grand oriental place that was like mysterious and nobody knows about. And now it's become like I actually want to go explore. I actually want to go and like experience the culture and experience the food and experience like the everyday life that you're kind of talking about. So I've also seen a lot of fellow Aussies around because of the visa-free policy. And it's really interesting all the kind of symbols that have come into the China maxing sphere, like, you know, the Tang Dynasty Adidas jacket that's become really famous. Personally,
I never thought that thing took off.
It took
it's so viral. It's amazing.
The first time I saw it, I was like, who came up with this bizarre idea?
But it's
and then a week later,
everywhere.
it's everywhere on social media. It was crazy.
It's everywhere. Like, I think the mark of someone who has been to China the first time is wearing that jacket.
Well, I haven't had a chance to go to the Adidas store, and I'm like chomping at the bit to get there. Like, that's like the one thing I want to buy. No, I'm like, I'm going to absolutely buy a couple of those. That'd be fantastic. I need to get it.
I mean, another symbol, like you said, is the hot water, right? It's all these... It's these everyday life symbols that are kind of like parts of Chinese culture, especially from a long time ago. You know, this Chinese, the hot water thing is a traditional Chinese medicine kind of practice that people have adapted. Because I think what people are trying to understand is that maybe there is something to learn from China. Maybe there is something to learn, not only from the ancient wisdom, but also about like how China developed into what it is today, you know, the socialist path of development. And so if we could go to the next meme, I think there is a lot about seeking alternatives, right? And so I found this cap that I thought was really funny. It says, "Hello, I am fleeing the American century of humiliation. Can you show me where to buy Mountain Dew Baja Blast?" And I think this is a meme that obviously is Chinese, so I would assume it's an American person coming to China, trying to show someone this cap or this translation to know where a Baja Blast can be found. But I think the key of this meme here is the American century of humiliation, which is also a term I've seen being thrown around a lot in tandem with China maxing. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think this is a really important thing is if we look at the most important things in your daily life, right? If you're looking at your cost of living, you know, whether that's your housing costs, your food costs, your transportation, your healthcare. I mean, these are the most basic elements in anybody's life, no matter where you are in the world. And in that regard, you know, those four things we mentioned, China is doing a very good job in providing that for its citizens at an affordable rate. Whereas in the United States, you know, we are seeing the complete opposite, where these prices for these are astronomical and just continuing to compound very, very fast. And especially in the last year, you know, with Donald Trump in presidency, you know, the housing costs, healthcare costs, you know, food costs, inflation, gas costs, everything is going up. I think a lot of young people are really feeling very trapped. And there's not a lot of hope in the future because it's like, it's very hard for me to get ahead. You know, if anything, a lot of the younger generation in America, they're trying to break even. How do I break even and survive right now in this kind of economy? But you look at the prices of housing is going so high, and all of a sudden it's like, gosh, you know, a two-bedroom apartment costs $1 million. How could I ever afford that? How could I even afford the down payment to that in order to get somewhere ahead in my life? Meanwhile, I'm trying to buy groceries and it's expensive. My healthcare costs are high. And then I think that's where I think the most curious story about this is how people are looking at China and they're saying, wow, like you can live in this apartment in Shanghai for that cost, and you go to a restaurant and it costs you this much, and wow, you had to go to the hospital, and this is what a world-class hospital costs. And so their eyes have been opened, and there's a lot of people starting to realize, like, hey, there's a whole world outside of America. And there's many Americans now that are leaving the United States and really trying to seek those alternative lifestyles, because if you can make your money abroad, and live and you have an opportunity to actually get ahead in life. And I've seen some other reels on Instagram where it's like, you know what the new American dream is? Earn your money in America and then get out and then go live abroad, because you can really lower your cost of living and actually get ahead. I mean, this is nothing new. I mean, we've seen a lot of American retirees, for example, go to Costa Rica and Panama, places that are much closer to North America.
Used to be just Florida.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, more people are leaving there, and I think Asia's becoming more popular, whether it's in Thailand or the Philippines or Vietnam or certainly China. I mean, people are realizing, like, wow, like there's a lot of value and a really great opportunity. And this is what I share. I have a opportunity to speak to a lot of universities and high schools, and people are always curious about my journey, and my message is always, please get a passport and go travel. Like, please go travel abroad and go experience this amazing world that we live in. You might find some incredible opportunities.
Yeah.
Do you think there might be a little bit of that cultural cachet thing going on? Because I agree with you, like everything you just said. Transportation, medical care, all of those things. If you live in America, you're an average citizen, you get a feeling that society is going downhill. Right. But I think when I was growing up, I watched Friends, I watched all those American television shows, and I thought everywhere in America looks like that kind of little tiny space where people felt safe. Right. You have camaraderie, you have people your age, have a very tight-knit community. Yeah. And then I go to America, I lived there for 10 years, and have that sense of glowing city upon the hill feeling. And I think it is only very recently that American youth have come to the realization that what they see on TV and what they live in their everyday, real, daily life feels like two completely different worlds.
Well, it's really funny that you mentioned Friends, because even if you look at that, right, it's such an unrealistic show, right? You have Rachel who works at a coffee shop, and then you look at the apartment that they're living in. I mean, that apartment in New York City would be unbelievable, the rent on that. It's a ginormous space, multiple bedrooms. It's a huge space. So, there was always this thing where, I remember, even earlier in the day, like let's say 15 years ago, I remember there was a university professor that kind of had a picture of the Friends set, and he's like, yeah, what you need to do is you need to, go learn some skills, go find a good job, actually make a career, because life is not like Friends. Right? You can't work in a coffee shop, go shopping on the weekends, hang out with your friends, live in this amazing apartment in New York City, and everything is, perfect, because that's a TV show. I think you brought up a good point there, because even for a lot of Americans, we're tricked into that. Not just people around the global south or other people in other countries. Even a lot of Americans kind of just thought, I mean, we all grew up watching Friends, right? That was by far the most popular television show in the 90s. I mean, all the stars were in there. It was such a popular show. And so we all kind of had that New York dream, right? Like, oh man, like it'd be great to go to New York. Like, it's so cool. Like, look at it. Like every single day they're hanging out having a latte at the shop. I mean, like who does that?
What a life.
With
your friends.
Yeah, with your friends. Like our entire day is surrounded by lattes on the couch, at our favorite coffee shop. It's always, I think this is where there's a facade, of that. And I think that's where a lot of people, especially I remember talking to, a lot of local Chinese where they would say, like, what's life in America like? Does everyone have mansions and everybody have sports cars? And it's like, no, like that's a very small segment. I'm like, honestly, it's no different than in China, where how many people here have mansions and sports cars? Yeah. It certainly exists, but it's not the normal thing, and I said for the average American, no, it's not. There's a lot of people just working normal jobs. Obviously it's a big country, so you have people in the country, you have the city life, different perspectives and things like that. So I think that's where a big problem, I think, in the United States right now is really the youth and kind of their attitude towards the future. Certainly a lot less trust in the government, kind of a feeling of being trapped and really trying to seek those alternative options around the world. But then, of course, you see China, and then that's how China fits into this, where the youth in America have a much more positive thought and much more positive opinion about China, because they're seeing, it's now very connected to us because of social media.
Yeah.
And that's something that, was really important. I mean, we just go back a few years ago during COVID. China was closed off to the world.
Yeah.
You know, I was locked out of China. I had about a span of about 4 or 5 years where I wasn't here, and I really started to feel very distant because I'm like, man, I haven't been back to China in a long time. I don't really, you know, it's kind of weird. Like I'm in America making videos about China, but I'm like, man, I haven't been back to China in like 4 years. Like I need to get back on the ground in China because you got to be here. You got to really experience it. You got to see what's going on. And, you know, that was a tough time for China during COVID because, like you said, it became kind of this mysterious place where people were like, oh, what's really going on? It was closed down for many, many years. And then, of course, we've seen the complete 180. Now it's like, well, we're opening up and we're making it visa-free and everybody come in. Now China's on track to become the #1 tourist economy in 2026, which is quite remarkable, you know, because more people are really coming to the country and experiencing it. And that curiosity factor is very high.
Yeah. I mean, you were saying before, you know, about how young people or the opening of the curiosity is really interesting. And I would say that you are part of that as well. You know, you've been teaching people for a long time, or at least showing people what China is really like and moving through all the mystery and the smoke and mirrors. And now that it feels like all the smoke has cleared, you know, it's the message that you send is still exactly the same as it's always been. So I wanted to ask you, what is your personal relationship and timeline to China? Because I would argue that you are the original China Maxer.
Oh, what a nice compliment. That is so nice. I mean, you know, so my personal connection to China and story, I mean, it goes back really to my university days. So as I was getting ready to graduate university, I was looking for my opportunity. Now, I actually, my skill and my background, I'm actually a golf professional. So I play golf at a high level. I became a professional, and so I wanted to get into the golf industry. And my mother is actually from Germany, so I grew up going to Europe, and I thought, you know, I really would like to leave America. I'd like to go abroad and just experience that. And so I went on to our PGA website, and there was only one opportunity abroad, and it actually happened to be in Shanghai.
Wow.
And so I was like, wow, China, that would be really cool. Like, I don't really know anything about China. Again, this was like 2007, so almost 20 years ago. And I just thought, oh, let me see what's going on. So there was a golf academy opening in Shanghai. I basically sent in my email, you know, I sent in a CV and, you know, basically, you know, just said I'd like to express some interest. Got a reply back from them. We had a phone call. And it was actually a really funny interview because the manager was from New Zealand, and he was a really chill guy, and he's just like, hey, why do you want to come to China? And I said, you know, I don't really know a lot about China, but I think China's going to be really important for the future. Like, I just think it'd be really cool to come. Like, I'd love to learn Chinese. I'd love to just experience it. And he's like, yeah, you sound like a cool guy. I'll give you a job. And he's like, got to go for a lesson. Talk to you later. So it was like literally like a 2-minute interview.
Wow.
And then I'm like, did I just get a job to China? so I kind of came back, and it was interesting because I had 2 job opportunities. I had a job in Florida where I'm from, and then I had a job in China. And I remember talking to my parents, and my parents were like, oh my God, like China, like what is this? And so I kind of really struggled for a while. In a couple of weeks, I was really thinking about this opportunity, and I just thought to myself, you know, I don't know what China's going to be like, but I don't want to ever have any regrets in my life. Like, you know, if I take that job in Florida, it's a job that I could always get. It's a job that's the comfort job. It's an easy job. And the reality is that it's always going to be there.
Yeah.
But I know that maybe a year or 2 later, I'll be like, I wonder what China would have been like. I wonder what my life would have looked like if I went to China. Obviously, you know, as a young man, you have this path that you know, you're presented with 2 paths, and it will fundamentally change your life, whichever path you take. And so but I said, you know what? The nice thing is that let's say I go and I hate it, I can always come back. Right? So maybe I do a year and I'm like, you know what? This isn't for me. I come back and I've spent a year in China. At least I had an experience. Right? You're young. You're 23, single. You know, no commitments. So I went, and it ended up being, you know, the best decision that I ever made. You know, it was really an incredible decision. And so I mean, 2007 was such a different China, right? I mean, the level of English spoken around China was very little. You know, I was immediately thrown into this environment where, wow, all of a sudden the street signs are in Chinese, you know, people aren't speaking English, you know, like, wow, this is a different experience. Right. You know, I had grown up going to Europe, and, you know, in Europe you can speak, you know, English and get around pretty easily, not a huge problem. But now I'm like, this is, you know, but there was like this adventure. I was like, this is awesome. You know, like I really embraced this adventure. I remember being with my colleague, and we were like down in some street in Shanghai, and there was this dumpling stand, and there was like a line of 100 people. And I was like, oh man, we got to get some of those dumplings. Like, whatever it is, it must be good
Yeah.
because there's 100 people. And my colleague was like, well, dude, we don't speak Chinese. I'm like, well, we got to figure it out. Like, I'm
Yeah.
sure we can point at something. Like, we got to get these dumplings, you know? And so I was just like, you know, I'm just like, you know, watching people, and I'm just like, yeah, like, you know, give us some dumplings, you know? And anyways, we have these dumplings, they're fantastic. And, you know, you just kind of embrace the kind of chaos of being lost in a new country and, you know, just walking around, trying to exploring. So I immediately fell in love with just a very simple life here. And then I really went down the rabbit hole. I was studying Chinese every day, really wanting to learn to speak Chinese. So within a year, I was giving golf lessons in Chinese. By the second year, I was the busiest golf pro in China, teaching 120 hours a month of golf lessons and traveling around the country, doing golf clinics, and really working on my career, but just really embracing the fact that I got to be in China doing what I love to do. I was like, I'm learning Chinese, I'm eating amazing food, my cost of living is low, I'm teaching golf, I'm playing golf. Like, this is a dream job. This is so much fun for me. And so it really just became a point where, China became a very big part of my life. And I was just really, just fell in love with China, and just really appreciated the opportunity that it presented me. And, ended up staying in China for about 10 years before I got married, and then, went back to the US for another opportunity. And now I kind of shifted to media, and then it's just been an amazing ride, building a big YouTube channel, but then having the opportunity to actually come back to China. So this is something you might not know. I actually started my YouTube channel, kind of with the goal of like, if I could actually grow this into something big, I might be able to use that to get back to China more often. Because I was like living in the US, I'm like, I can always kind of keep my China connection with my YouTube channel. And here we are. That's where it's been able to like bring me back. And
That's so cute.
yeah, it's been awesome. And now it's like, now I'm on a 2-month tour. I'm traveling to 12 different cities. Like for example, I'm flying to Guiyang after this event, and new province, going to Guizhou. Never been there before, so I'm like, this is great. This
My
is
favorite province.
Yeah, I'm excited. I can't
Yeah.
wait. I can't wait. It's gonna be great.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, your timeline, your journey to China, you said you were here in 2007.
Yes.
Like, I don't even remember 2007.
Have you been to China in 2007?
I think I was in China in 2007, but I was, small. I was a small person.
Yeah.
But it's really amazing just to talk to someone who has seen the changes of it all and who has kind of like, it really shifted the course of your life,
Yes.
like coming, just being open, having that exploration.
For sure.
Because I would say, especially during that time, again, because of the shrouded mystery of it all,
Right.
maybe some people wouldn't even think of China as an option.
No,
It would just
definitely.
be like way too distant or way too, I don't know, like uncertain of a future. And I think for you, you really leapt in, and now your whole life is kind of dedicated to it,
Yeah.
To hear that you started the YouTube channel to kind of and maintain that connection to China is really sweet. So
Yeah, I started the YouTube channel because I just thought, I'm an American that lived there for a long time, speak Chinese, understand the culture. I mean, I probably know more about China than 99% of Americans, So I can share, I have some perspective here, So I'm like, it's kind of almost like, it'd be a little bit of a waste of an opportunity if I don't kind of share my story a little bit and try to help people understand China more. And that was especially during like COVID, right? When all of a sudden, very big anti-China sentiment started raising up. I was living in Vancouver, Canada. I mean, Vancouver has a tremendous Chinese population. Interesting enough, at the same time, there was a tremendous amount of anti-China, racist attacks and a lot of things happening in Vancouver, which really upset me because, Canada is a country where, diversity and immigration have been a very big part of that story. And so, I mean, I saw this in personally, like firsthand, like racist things towards Chinese, where like, for example, I was shopping in a mall, and there was an old elderly Chinese couple who were speaking Chinese to each other. And this person, started like, don't you speak that language here? Like, we're in Canada, you speak English. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, these people can speak whatever language they want to each other.
And I bet they don't say that to people speaking French.
Yeah, right. And
know
I was
what I
just
mean?
like, I'm like, you can speak whatever language you want.
Vancouver, it's like a quarter of the population probably speak Chinese.
Yeah, and so there was a lot of like racist things that I saw, and it became very personal to me because my wife's Chinese. We have 3 mixed race children, and I said, look, there's nothing wrong with speaking Chinese. You have to, even if we have differences, right? I know that not everyone is going to look at the Chinese government in a favorable light, but, put that aside. Let's talk about the people-to-people connection, right? Chinese people are amazing. The culture's great. And if you come here, again, by coming to China, it doesn't mean that, I serve the government or I agree with everything. But it's like, forget the government. Just come here and experience the country.
Yeah.
Experience the food. Experience the culture. Connect with the people. Have a great holiday here.
Yeah.
And just get a little bit of taste of what's really happening on the ground here in China. You're going to leave a different person. And I mean, I don't know a single person that's actually been to China and then not left with a totally different perspective from what the media has presented to them.
Yeah. I read a Wall Street Journal opinion page the other day saying that if there's only one thing coming out of this US-China summit meeting, that is there are a lot of officials in the Trump administration who's never set foot in China.
Right.
Marco Rubio has never been to China. Stephen Miller has never been to China. And this opinion page writer says it gives you a different sense of what the people feel like having had them serve you food, talk to you, chat with you, not about politics, but just about regular stuff.
For sure.
And then I thought about, he's writing about Stephen Miller, so God knows what they were talking about.
Right.
Does this guy even have a personal life?
Right.
But there's always one question I wanted to ask you, Cyrus. How do you think your view on China have changed since you've started doing your channel? Because you've been living in China for a long time,
right.
And you went to Vancouver. You started doing your channel as a way, it's lovely, as a mean to connect to your old memories, your friends, your experience living in China.
Right.
But your channel has since grown into like 1 million followers, a big thing now. How does turning it into like a semi-career for you changed how you see the country, the people, your experience back then when you were still a young person? You're still a young person now, but even younger person teaching golf in Shanghai.
I mean, I think honestly, it's just made me have more appreciation for China. And I think, when we talk about how fast things change in China. I like to give this really good example of, back in 2007, everything in China was done in cash, right? And that continued up until, probably like say 2015, 2016. So, and what's happening in China is there's this amazing ability from Chinese people to change very quickly. So, for example, when I tell people in America, China's a cashless society. And they're like, what does that mean? And I'm like, yeah, well, everything's run through WeChat. Everything's on your phone. People don't use cash. Everything's digital. And in America, people are scared of that. They're just like, whoa, that's just the government trying to like control everything. I'm like, no, it doesn't really have anything to do with that. But Americans would be very, very skeptical to changing to a system like that. But China, they're so used to seeing change happen so fast. And so I think, for example, if you're a 60-year-old Chinese person, think about what you've seen in your 60 years of life, right? When you were born, China was very poor, right? I mean, very poor. I mean, it was one of the, there was not a lot of development there. And then you've seen it opening up, you've seen it develop. Now you've seen it become, the leader in many of the most important technologies in the world. And now you're seeing a society where you travel around the country. And I mean, even the changes that I've seen in Shanghai, I mean, I remember how smoggy and dirty, the streets were. Back in the day, people were honking on the streets. There were motorcycles everywhere. There was kind of this chaos of being in China. And you kind of embraced it. Like, I liked it because I'm like, man, this is so cool. Like, you're in the kind of like the, this crazy country, that's got a lot of action. There's a big energy to that. And then now everything is, the streets are clean. The smog has been cleaned. Everything is now electric vehicles, right? I used to drive a gas motorbike to work. Those are banned, right? They're gone. Everything's now electric because of the environment.
Yeah.
And so, the ability for Chinese people to change and see these changes and adapt change, that's something I think is really, really interesting. And again, just think about like going from an all cash society to an all digital society really within like less than a year. The transition was instant. It was really, really cool to see. So I think Chinese people are very open to change because they've seen their lives change significantly. And I think that's a big part of the story here.
And from what you said, it's also because I also, came here as a kid a lot and I saw these changes as well, within like a decade, the cashless society happening. And it's interesting because a lot of our elders, they are more efficient and proficient at their phones, the digital technology, than I am. They know all the hidden features of the WeChat mini
Shame
program.
on you, Mimi. Shame on you.
No, look, I'm so proud of them. And also, it goes to show the level of connectivity the society has as well. I don't think it's actually created to separate everyone or atomize everybody.
Right.
And there are so many free classes for elders to access where they can learn how to, use these devices or use these apps to integrate them into this new version of society, which I know that Americans are skeptical of, but it's interesting as you were talking about the changes around you, like the smog clearing up or the noise pollution changing. That's a big one that I noticed. But I feel like that image is still used against us all the time. The smoggy skies. I love how they, like, especially like the BBCs or like the anti-China news channels.
It's like in Breaking Bad, there's one filter for US shots and there's one filter for Mexican shots.
Yeah. No,
exactly.
It's almost like in news media, there's one filter for China and there's one filter for countries that have.
And the filter they use, they're clinging on to an image from before. Because I actually feel like, as much as you say maybe Americans are skeptical of change within their own society, they also are not willing, at least maybe the older generations, are not willing to accept the changes that are happening in Chinese society.
Right.
Which is where China Maxing comes into play, because now all these young people are really open to the changes of China, right?
Yeah.
Like all these incredible landscapes that they're filming, like there's all these places that young people from overseas are really accessing all the time in China. I see these really romantic videos about China. I see these funny, really cute videos all about China, and I never expected it. But I wanted to pull up a video, actually an American who did come to China and love it. And Cyrus, you actually sent me this one.
Nice.
So maybe we could take a look.
China was wild. Honestly, what an incredible trip to be on. I was truly honored to have been there. It was amazing to see how different it was to physically be there on the ground versus what got reported here in the United States. Our society and our country is young and relativity to like the rest of the world. You look at a society and a country like China, man, they've been around for 6,000 years or so, maybe a little bit more. We've been around for 250. So very interesting to see all the history. And I mean, the coolest part, Eric and I got to go to the Great Wall of China. And honestly, it was so much more impressive than I anticipated. Highly recommend, if you ever find yourself in China, check out the Great Wall.
Love
Sorry.
Yeah. If you ever find yourself in China,
Check out
check out the Great Wall. I mean, to be honest, it's good advice. I'll comment on a couple of things that she said. So first of all, this is Laura Trump, Trump's daughter-in-law, and I think what's so cool about this is that she picked up on a couple of things that I wasn't expecting her to say. Number one, it's like it doesn't, the image of China is not what's being reported in the United States. And that's a big admission from her, saying that. And the other thing is just really talking about, the difference in the civilizations. And that's something that a lot of people make a mistake about in the West because, when we hear, China, it's like, well, yeah, it's a society that's been around for 5,000 plus years.
She added 1,000 years to
she
Chinese
did.
civilization.
Yeah. But I mean, that's actually a common point, you actually hear from a lot of Chinese people, right? They're very proud of that, right? That's something they always tell foreigners, we've had a long history, right? We've been around for 5,000 years. And it's great for her to see her acknowledge that. And yeah, I mean, the Great Wall is fantastic. I mean, I'm glad it exceeded our expectations, but it's more important is, it's very different than what's been reported on and the image that we see in America. And coming from a Trump daughter-in-law, I think that was the real key message there. And I mean, and that's where I kind of go back. I mean, if you haven't been to China, it's going to blow your mind because it's going to be so different than what you expect. And so I don't know a single person that's actually been here and then gone back the same person, and especially, in recent years, because some people say, well, I was back in China, in 2001 and I didn't really like it. I'm like, bro, like 2001 China, it's a different country.
Yeah, forget about it.
Forget about it. I mean, like, 2001 China, like you actually had kind of a really more like very rural Chinese experience, like it would have been pretty cool to be back there, because like I said, it's more of that adventure and some. Now China's just so, like we were out for dinner last night and I mean, we're right at the, it's so modern. And I mean, you would put that part of town, you compare that to anywhere in the world. I mean, it's as world class as it gets, clean, efficient, beautiful malls, just absolutely gorgeous. And that's just people don't realize that that's what's happening here on the ground in China.
Yeah.
Think about China. On one hand, it's a 5,000-year civilization. On the other hand, like you said, if you've been here 20 years ago and you stopped coming for 20 years, it's a different place. Yeah. It feels completely different. But here's my hot take. And Mimi know exactly what I'm about to say.
Love a hot take.
He loves a hot take.
I wonder, when people think about China as a 5,000-year civilization, do they realize how different China, modern China is to even China 50, 60, 70 years ago? And when Lara Trump says she doesn't realize how, the previous version of Lara Trump didn't realize how different America is with 250 years of history versus China, 5,000 years of history. But a lot of that 5,000 years of development was really compressed and fundamentally changed since 1949.
Correct.
Or some people say since 1978, when Deng Xiaoping opened up the market reforms. I wonder, what's your take on this? When you talk to Chinese people, when you live in China, do you feel that this is a young country, or do you feel like this is a country that's been here for a long time and people talk in terms of decades?
That's an interesting question, because I think it's a bit of both, to be honest. Because I think when we talk about the hot drinks that we're drinking, right? And then it would be like, this is traditional Chinese medicine that's obviously been around for thousands of years. We look at some of the hanfu and some of the, whatever, clothing.
He hates hanfu. Yeah, he hates
But I mean, that's become very popular for young Chinese because they're kind of tapping into their roots, right? And they're really exploring this, which I think is great to kind of, understand your culture. And, you walk around the Forbidden City and you see, some of these ancient sites around China. You can just get an appreciation for how long this civilization has been here. But I do like your point there that, it's actually, if you look at from 1978 until 2026, it's almost like a brand new country's emerged. And so it is actually a lot of that 5,000 years. I mean, a lot of it's condensed in the very end because there's just been such a rapid ascension to the top and a rapid development that has just been so remarkable. And so again, I just really like to look at those. I just think if you talk to people that are in their 60s and 70s and you really ask them about their life in China, they're going to have a very great appreciation for their country because they've seen the worst and now they're seeing the best. And it's all happened within one lifespan. And so it's something different where, like, a lot of the youth in China today, right? They don't know what a poor China's like, right? They only know, like, I mean, these kids that are growing up here, they'll never know what, like, actual cash is. I mean, they might see it every now and then, but they don't know what it's like to carry around wads of cash because everything's going to be, well, my entire life is through WeChat. So I mean, it's a different society, and it's amazing because some of the largest. Here's kind of an interesting hot take. Some of the largest anti-China voices in the West, especially in America, are actually Chinese people. And they're Chinese people that have left China at a very young age. And it's kind of funny, there's this one lady, she's, I'm gonna say she's at least 60, maybe close to 70. Her name is Xi Van Fleet, right? And so she is like, her entire thing is she's running for political office, and every single thing is the Democrats want to do this and they want to turn it into communist China. I know what communist China is like. I was born under Chairman Mao's rule and I grew up in the rural China. And so my thing to her is, I'm like, when have you been to China, right? Like, and so like we've kind of had some like little Twitter battles. She's just like, oh, you think you're a foreigner that's been in China, you know more about China than me. And I'm like, with all due respect, if you haven't been to China in 40 years, like, you're wanting people to look at China the way it was in the 1970s, right? Or 1960s, right? And you kind of you always try to bring it back to like Chairman Mao times, like, oh, under Chairman Mao, this is what happened. I'm like, okay, can we also acknowledge that doesn't apply anymore? Or are you just going to try to paint this picture that everyone's living under Chairman Mao's time? It's a different story. Like, things have changed.
And even during Chairman Mao's time, if you ask a contemporary person then compared to his life like 20 years ago in 1930s, when life expectancy was like 35 years old, he would still say there's a lot of improvement even within that 20-year span. For sure.
I kind of relate it to, it'd be very similar to be like, well, in the United States, there was segregation. Black people used to not, be, accepted in society. There was different color bathrooms. Okay, can we also recognize that doesn't exist anymore? Right? Your entire mindset is based in 1962, and sorry, it's 2026. So unless you're coming here to China, and there's a lot of these, I think the other thing that's been interesting phenomena is a lot of the anti-Chinese, that are in America, they almost have to kind of take that stance to kind of justify their reason in being there.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's something that I see because, it's just like, oh, why would you go back to China in the summer, Cyrus? Like America's better. And I'm like, well, when's the last time you were back? And it's like, oh, I got out of there a long time ago, 1981, and I'd never want to go back. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well,
You're missing out.
You probably should. You'd probably have a great appreciation for it. And I think that's where, like, when we're talking about China maxing and tourists coming here, again, I mean, I don't want to, turn this into a political thing. It's not like, you can come to China and enjoy the country, the people, the culture, the cuisine, so many things about China without having any opinion about the government. Just come and enjoy it, right?
I think like in my response to your take, and I kind of said something like this in the previous episode as well, and I think a combination of both of your takes is that, the thing about China is that, yes, we have had a 5,000 plus year history, and there's a lot of elements of that history that are still applied today. And I think with the modernization of China, like you said, some of the restaurants, the malls that we go to, they're so modern. They literally look like spaceships, it's really like a glimpse into the future. But at the same time, not everything is becoming like that, right? There are hubs of like modernization that looks in that specific way, but modernization is also different. Modernization is also the improvement of people's lives. And I think for me, the most important thing is that everyday people have more access to things. Whereas in like feudal China, again, a very small percentage of the royalties or the emperors and empresses could access the good food and like the lavish hanfu and everything. But now, because of 1949, because of the victory of the Communist Party, now we're able to see China not only modernize, but also maintain some of its cultural history, right? And everybody can access that. And I think that's really beautiful. So people come for the modernization and they also come for the traditional history. And I love that it's a society where you can access both.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. 100%. I would agree with that.
Yeah. Speaking about, some of the anti-China Chinese people, can we pull up a tweet, an interaction that you had on Twitter that you sent to me? So this is you speaking to a person called Ken, if I'm not wrong?
Yes.
Could you contextualize this interaction that you had?
Well, there's a really interesting, maybe YouTuber or commentator on Twitter. His name is Ken Zhao. And he basically had a post where he said, I've decided that I'm not going to teach Mandarin to my children, and here's the reason why. Number one, if you learn to speak Mandarin Chinese, you are now subjugated to all of the propaganda from China. Your mindset will be changed to the Chinese government's way of thinking, and it's a very, danger, for the future of your children. And, honestly, he's like, for example, I think there's many better skills in the world to focus your time and attention on, whether it would be investing or playing tennis. You only have so many hours in a day. Why would you waste that, trying to learn something that is, deeply connected to the Chinese government? And actually it was really funny because, he was very much ratioed in this comment. I thought that it's sad to see someone so lost in their life and that they will be able to whitewash themselves and just say, I need to make sure that my kids don't speak Chinese. That's sad. I feel sad for his children because at the end of the day, you can go live abroad. You can say, again, I don't like the Chinese government. That's fine. You can have whatever opinion you want, but don't lose track of your roots. Like my mother's German. I speak German. I grew up speaking German with her, and I'm very proud of my German roots, and I'm very proud of. There's a lot of elements that I'm very proud of in my Germanness. I have OCD. I'm very organized and detail oriented. That's very much from my German side of my heritage. And so, but learning to speak German is, it'd be similar. It's like, does that mean that I am a Nazi? That Adolf Hitler is, I now have an Adolf Hitler mindset because I would speak the same language as Hitler? Of course not. So we have to realize that this changes. And I just think it's very sad for someone to, basically make that opinion. And I just said, and he also said, he's just like, the other thing is that it's impossible to try to learn to speak Chinese and make money off of that. How could you actually make money by learning to speak another language? And I'm like, wow. I was like, I could actually refute that immediately because I was one of the top teaching golf pros in China where I would spend 10 to 11 hours every single day teaching in Chinese. And I've literally made hundreds of thousands of dollars teaching golf in Chinese, and that was a skill set because I was able to speak Chinese. I mean, it's a very simple argument that you could easily win. But again, I feel bad for people that are so lost where, you're going to deny even learning your own culture, and being able to pass that on to your own children. That's sad. That's a huge miss for his children. Feel bad for him.
Ken should know, because at least if you learn Chinese, you can still have a career at the CIA.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that is sad. That is just so sad that he made that claim, because out of everything, I think he's trying to not only like completely cut the roots for his children, make that decision for them, but also what is he integrating himself into?
Right.
What is he trying to be a part of? And I think that is a very strange, and I'm really glad that you stood up to him because.
Well, I mean, it's kind of just sad. I mean, and I just said, that's one thing that, I mean, I've seen people before where, they're just like, I would never go to China, because I don't like communists. To be honest, what's actually really nice about China is that it's not very political when you're there, right? Yeah. Chinese people don't talk about politics. And whereas you're so exhausted from that conversation in the United States because politics dominates the conversation, right? Everyone's talking about the latest thing from Trump. Oh, guess what? We have the midterm elections coming in November. Then you're going to have another presidential election, which 18 months has a huge run up where you're bombarded with political adverts on your phone and the radio and TV, and it just dominates your life. And, for a lot of people, it's kind of like, gosh, I don't really want this. Like, I kind of want to just get on with my life, right? I want to work on my career. I want to connect with my friends. Let's go out for a dinner. Let's go on a holiday. And so I said, that's the thing I want more people to really realize more about China. What is one thing I want people to know about China? It's the simple fact that right now in China, there's, people sitting at a coffee shop, reading a book, sitting and having a conversation, talking
just
about,
like friends.
talking about a date they went on. There's a grandma who's going to pick up their kids from school and walk home and buy some vegetables for dinner tonight. It's a very normal society here. And I think that's where we tend to lose that human connection where people kind of think, oh, China's bad, the government's not good. And then you kind of demonize 1.4 billion people without realizing that, no matter where you travel in the world, right, we all have the same ambitions, right? We want to have a good career. Hopefully we make a little bit of money that we can save. We'll retire it someday. We want to have a better life for our children. Hopefully, we can raise good children for, that live a good life. And that's really what we're working on, And I mean, I've traveled to 65 countries around the world. I've seen that kind of everywhere you go. Everyone kind of wants the same things in life, right? I mean, spending time with your family is important. Good meals with friends, stability. I mean, this is what we're all wanting for in our lives. No different in China.
Yeah. One thing really shocked me when I came back to China in March was that, I worked in New York City, and sometimes after work, take a cab back home, and on the Uber ride, you make small talk with the driver, right? And a lot of times that small talk starts with the driver saying, oh, this politician is crazy, right? Or Trump said this crazy thing, right? And politics became such a way to start small talk.
Right.
It permeates into everyday life. You meet someone at work, and in New York City, chances are the person you meet at work is a fairly mainstream liberal person. Right. So you start with dunking on the same politicians that most liberal people hate. Right. And that became this way to start a conversation, and didn't realize how toxic, how tiring it is. And after I got back to China, I realized that the society that's supposed to be run by one party state, supposed to feed you propaganda, political propaganda all day, every day. It's really like when people ask me what it feels like living in China, my answer has been, it's chill.
It's very chill. Yeah, it's very relaxed. And
politics feels so distant. Like it's something you study at party school. It's not really something that people talk at dinner table, let alone do small talk. The Chinese people barely do any small talk to begin with.
Yeah.
But to the extent they do, politics is so far off from what people usually care about.
I think more Americans would be very happy to hear that because it is exhausting, and it's to the point now in America where our society is so divided where you don't, you kind of have to know what kind of room you're in.
I mean, relating to what you were saying before, I think there is a reason why people are so kind of caught in this toxic cycle of talking about politics because it mirrors their everyday living conditions, right? I think the politics of the United States at the moment definitely reflects the skyrocketing rent prices and the unaffordability of food, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's the way that people kind of understand or process it together by hating on a politician, etc.
Or loving a politician. Like
loving
when
a
New Yorkers talk about
politician.
Mamdani, like a lot of, I get it. Like when you live in a place where rent keeps getting higher and higher and your wage isn't getting higher and higher, then comes a politician saying they're going to freeze rent. Of course you're going to talk about him.
For sure.
Like of course it affects people's lives. So like politics become this very direct thing that you experience that you know can like have a real impact on your life. Whereas like politics in China, to the extent we can call it politics, like building up like a community center in like Jing'an district. Like, is that politics? That is kind of political economy, that is politics, but also it feels very mellow. Like it's something that...
And it improves people's lives.
Yeah, it improves people's lives, but also in a very kind of mundane, like, and serious way. Like it's just what government does. It's what infrastructure, what public service means. And that's what governments do or supposed to do.
And I think like the anti-China perception that comes out of, you know, the idea that, oh my gosh, China has people with machine guns everywhere, just overlooking you and surveilling you at all times, etc. That's a projection, you know, because also having lived in the United States, in New York City really does feel like a police state. You know, there are cops everywhere. The NYPD just swarms. And it's so insane that I'll be at the subway station, like any subway station, especially in Manhattan. And if I go to these specific ones, which I think as a New Yorker, you kind of have to start to memorize which ones are safe to go to or which ones you shouldn't go to. But tell me why there was like an army, like SWAT team there, just manning the gate so people don't like hop skip the fee, right? The $3 fee to get on the rusty, stinky subway.
Not only the stations, you memorize the exits. Like which exit has like police around or homeless people around, like really violent people around there. And it took me a while when I moved back to Shanghai to like get rid of the feeling that when I see a police officer, I have a physical reaction to them. Like I did a lot of pro bono in New York City, and a lot of my clients, like the only thing I did was like attend the bail hearing. And the police officers, when they look at my client, even for that like very brief moment, like the sense of like absolute hatred, like it's just, it gets to you. And when I get back to Shanghai, at first when I saw police officers, I just kind of, like I didn't even, my girlfriend mentioned it to me. She mentioned that I would like kind of shirk a little bit. I would walk around them, like I would not make eye contact. And she's like, "What the hell? Like, what did you do? Like in America? Like, are you like hiding something from me?" Like, no, I didn't realize that's my natural reaction. And now I got used to it. Like police officers, like they occupy a different like spot in society in Shanghai.
Literally yesterday, I saw 3 police officers just helping one old man. I'm not sure what he was talking about, but it just seemed like he was lost. He maybe had like memory loss or something, but he didn't know where to go. And 3 police officers were tending to his needs. That would never happen in the US, you know? I feel like what I've seen in the US is some pretty like abuse of power from what I've seen, and a fear, like a real fear. And we had a bunch of visitors come to China recently that I took around and I showed them some places I love out here. And I asked them, you know, what was the biggest thing that you noticed? And I thought, you know, some of them would say, oh, how cheap the food is, da 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 da. But the first thing some of them said was, it doesn't feel like a police state. I was like, whoa. Not only does that show me, okay, obviously, you know, you're surprised by this lie or this perception about China, but also, what must you feel in the US where you're like constantly just so tense or like scared of the police who, aren't they supposed to serve and protect, right? Aren't they supposed to actually make you feel safe?
I remember like one of the last text messages I got when I was living in Jersey City was the city government texting its residents where was the last spot that an ICE agent was spotted in the city.
That's
like,
crazy.
And that's like, if you are like someone who's impacted by this, that's a good thing. Like the city is texting out, and the city texting out where the federal agent is. Like
that's New Jersey, right?
That's New Jersey. That's on the other side of the Hudson River.
I mean, U.S. has just become so crazy with that ICE agents and just the chaos, and that's you talk about that. I mean, there's a lot of like civil instability there because, you know, having protests and then police are here and this and that. It's just very chaotic. Where, you know, when you come back to China and there's a lot of organization here, and, you know, I mean, like I was on the Bund this morning, you know, just walking around early in the morning, just kind of getting ready for my day of media interviews, and but you just see 50 elderly people on the side of the bun with the Chinese music and doing Tai Chi. And it's just so peaceful to watch them. I just sat there, just watched them for like 5 minutes because I'm like, this is just so beautiful. Because I think for a lot of Americans, they would not, again, like we tend to kind of, demonize a country and say like, China's bad, it's communist. And then, but all of a sudden, like if I could just bring you to the Bund and just show you like, here's 50 Chinese people at 6 a.m, doing Tai Chi, with the sun rising up. And and you can just kind of see how happy they are, and it's just like, wow, this is really neat. And then like down the road, there's a guy playing a saxophone.
Yeah.
There's the people with two elderly ladies with fans, just having a conversation. And so there's this really nice peacefulness that's here in China. And I think there's a much more simpler way of life. It's certainly like I'm in the United States for 10 months, and then in summer for 2 months I come back. But I would say, like for my wife and I, kind of leading up to like months 8, 9, we're like, okay, we're really ready to get out of the U.S. Like we're kind of like chomping at the bit to get out. And then we're like, we need to kind of decompress from the U.S. We need to kind of get back to China where things are, really simple. And another really fun story is, with our 3 children, we're obviously very, very aware of their safety at all times. And then when we come to China, for example, I went to a store in Hong Kong. I was buying some, clothes. I bought these new clothes for these interviews, and my kids were like, "Can we get some ice cream?" And my wife's like, "Yeah, use my WeChat code, and you guys go get ice cream. It's on the 2nd floor." And my daughter, who's 10, is like, "We're gonna go by ourselves?" And she's like, "Yeah, you can go by yourself. You're fine. Like you're in China. Like no problem."
You don't let that happen in the U.S.?
We would never let that happen in the U.S. I mean, not a chance. But the kids, all of a sudden, they thought it was so cool because they're like, sweet, like we get to go get ice cream by ourselves. And they go up the escalator, down over there, get their ice cream, come back down. And that was like their little adventure. Yeah, we can't, you would never do that in America. It's not safe. I would never let my daughter, especially my daughter, but even my sons, I wouldn't let them out of my sight. They're 10 and 7. But yeah, I wouldn't let them go to a shopping mall in America by themselves to go get an ice cream. Not a chance. Not a chance at all. But that's why. So now it's funny because now like when we go to a mall, it's like, can I get ice cream or can I get something? Like it's almost like I want to get something just so I can go by myself again. Because like I'm here in China, I get to do that. I got a taste, but it's like, hey, while we're in China, let me kind of take advantage of this. And so my daughter's like, do you need a coffee? I saw a coffee shop. I can go get you a coffee, Daddy.
That's so cute.
And so it's like she just wants like, give me some tasks to do because I can like go around the mall with your QR code and get stuff for you. And I'm just like, yeah, you know what, honey? Like when you're in China, you're safe here. Like I'm not going to worry about you. And even a funnier story, when we were staying at a service apartment in Guangzhou, this is really funny, like literally day one, this was last summer, so my twin boys were 6, and so the oldest twin boy, he runs in the elevator, and then the door shut and goes up, and my wife's like, oh my God, right? It's like a 40-level building, and so she's freaking out. I'm like, okay, hey, like, it's okay, like we'll sort this out. So of course, like in the building, we got the security guards, and so my wife's like freaking out, and I'm just like, hey, okay, well, one of us needs to kind of go up and figure out where he's at. The other one needs to stay on the bottom just to make sure he doesn't go out of the door. But we go to the Baoan, the security, and he's just like, and so my wife's freaking out, and we're speaking in Chinese, and he's just like, hey, like relax. He's like, we got cameras on all 40 floors. So like, and you got all 40 cameras right there. He's like, we'll see him when he comes out. And then he's just like, and then she's just like, you're Chinese, right? Like, why are you so nervous? And she's like, no, like we're from America. He's like, oh, that's why you're nervous. And he's just like, no, he's like, 没关系, 没关系, 不要担心的, 不要, 在中国很安全的, 没事的, 没事的. So it's just like, hey, you're in China, you're safe. And then, so all of a sudden we see him get out on the 39th floor, and we're like, oh, poor little guy. He's probably scared. He was only 6. But obviously we're like, we'll get him back. And so anyways, he ended up going back in the elevator, came back down, and ended up being good. But it was just like the kind of attitude from the security guard of just like, oh, he's no problem. Like we'll keep an eye out on him. And my wife's like, well, what if somebody opens the door in the elevator? I'm like, he'll be fine. Like we're in China. Like we don't. But it's our mentality, right? Like if we lost him in a building in America, we'd be very scared.
Yeah.
And so I mean, it's just a different thing. We live in Las Vegas. I mean, we just are very, very aware of our surroundings at all times. You don't want to be in crowded areas. So I don't like to be in these big crowded areas in America. There's too many things that could go wrong. And that's just, I'm just being honest. I mean, that's just how I feel. You know, like a couple of years ago, our hockey team won the championship in Vegas. My friends are like, let's go down for the parade. Like, you're gonna have a huge parade, 100,000 people. I'm like, I don't want to be in a public space with 100,000 people out in the open, streets and stuff. And you know, there's always some type of violence. There's always crazy people. There's gun crimes. There's all this stuff. Like, it's not worth it for me. You know, so that's you just got to be, I mean, that's just different. I'm just sharing my honest opinion as an American, you know, a little bit of this different society. So, you know, that's where, again, when we talk about those basic things in life, I mean, I think safety for me is a basic human right. You know, I mean, if you can't keep your citizens safe on the streets, that's an issue, right? If you know, your housing costs, your healthcare, your food, these are the basic things that have to be met in a civil society. And hot take, China does a better job at delivering that for its citizens than the United States does.
Yeah.
And that's why you've seen the China maxing. That's why you've seen people become more curious, why you've seen China on track to become the #1 tourist economy this year, because more people are seeing it. It's becoming big on social media. People are entering that very Chinese phase of their life, and they're loving it, and they're coming here to explore it further.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about that story about your daughter and how she, you know, got access to the QR code and how she wants to run around the mall and get you a Luckin coffee or whatever.
Yeah.
And what came to mind is that she had a taste of freedom.
Right.
Like, she had a taste of what it would be like for her to run around and buy whatever she wants, or, you know, just like feel safe and feel like no one's gonna hurt her.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, also both of us living in the United States, that tenseness, not only that we feel from the police who are supposed to protect us, but also in general, right, with mass shootings and all these crazy things. I feel like your daughter had a taste of what freedom is. And in that sense, I think freedom in China is defined very differently to how freedom is defined in the US, isn't it? Like,
definitely. So I think there's a really good explanation for this, because I always say, you know, this is one of the big talking points that you hear from a lot of people, where they say, well, you know, China doesn't have freedom, right? Like, in China, you're not allowed to vote for your president. You know, they don't know what real freedom is like. My counter to that is always, you know, we kind of equate it to one simple thing. Like, you think voting for your president is going to be, you know, an amazing thing. You know, like, I mean, a lot of people in America, we have this thing called elect and regret, right? Like, we're not happy. It's always the choice of the smaller of two evils, right? And so I think the issue is that there's a lot more to freedom than just saying voting for your president. A lot of people tell me, Cyrus, you know what? In America, I can go to the White House and hold up a sign that says Donald Trump is an asshole. That's true freedom. And my counter to that is, well, what does that do for you, right? What change does that help? I mean, maybe it helps you relieve some steam, but literally it does nothing for you, okay? It's kind of like, you know, just being angry for an hour. Like, okay, after an hour, what do you get? You're more stressed out, you're more angry, you've just wasted an hour. It doesn't really do anything for your life, right? And so that's the thing that is really you know, different about that. Because you know what's better than being able to say my president's an asshole? Having a president that's not an asshole, right? That's the difference.
Yeah.
But I'll answer the question, you know, what is the difference between freedom in China and freedom in the United States? Freedom in China means different things to different people. And I think this is really important for people to understand. If we go to the United States, you know, where did our country begin? Our country began by us literally grabbing rifles and firearms and saying, look, the redcoats are coming. We got to protect ourselves from the British. Too much government, you know, control. We want freedom from the government. And so grab your rifles. The redcoats are coming. Fight for your freedom. And so from day one, like, owning a gun and fighting against the government has kind of been how the United States was formed. And so if you look at Americans today, the right to bear arms, huge fundamental right in America, right? I mean, that will never change, because for so many Americans, I want freedom. I want to have that gun. Now, my question that I always get, you know, when I'm in China, Chinese people are, you from America? Hey, what about the guns?
What about the guns?
Like, what? Like, tell me about guns in America. And I was talking to the security guard at that service apartment, and he's like, what's with the guns there? Like, don't you guys want to have more safety? And I'm like, well, for a lot of Americans, they think that having guns is safety. And he's like, well, that doesn't make sense, right? If you have a country with a lot of guns, you're going to have more shootings. So it's not safe. I'm like, you're not wrong. You're actually right.
Yeah.
Statistically, you're right, because that's how it works. But here's the issue, is that in American mindset, it's that culture, right? It's that culture that our culture is built on, that we want to have less government. Now, again, we talked about the 5,000 years of history. Well, interesting enough, in China, there has been all these different dynasties, and the dynasties rise and they fall, rise and fall. Corruption, battles, killings, this, dude, a lot of turmoil for millennial, turmoil. And so all of a sudden, what happened is that the government stepped in to bring that stability. So for Chinese people, freedom means stability. And that's why you said, from 1949 until the present, that has been this stability. That's why Chinese people, right, like Wending, right, you want to have that stability. That is the key element for Chinese people, is having that stability, because it's like, well, yeah, we've been around for 5,000 years, but it's been a lot of chaos over 5,000 years. We had the century of humiliation as well. We had the drug battles. We had this, we had that. Like, gosh, we need some stability that we can move forward as a society. And so that's where Chinese people would never look at like, well, I want to own a gun. Why? We have a society that has no gun crime.
Yeah.
That to us is freedom, because it is stability. So my biggest thing is if you look at China from the eyes of an American, you're not going to understand it. Because Chinese people, Americans will tell me, well, in China, you can't own a gun, so you don't have freedom. And I'm like, well, again, you're looking at it from your American culture, right? I get American culture. I'm American. I understand why you want a gun, because that's kind of how we were raised in America. A lot of people have guns. It's just what we do. And that's kind of, again, how our country was founded, by grabbing guns and fighting off the British. But in China, they don't value that, because safety is number one, right? Being able to go into a society where, yeah, our kids, there's kids in China, they jump on the metro at age 5, 6 and go to school, right? That happens in China, right? You would never see that in the United States. And so again, it's a different society when your kids are allowed to be running on the streets, and there's no safety issues here. And that's what I would say. I'm like, going back to the thing I keep talking about, those 4 basic elements, China's delivering on that. And for me, safety is probably number one. It's really important.
Cyrus, all your reflections were so amazing. Thank you so much for sharing with us and spending time with us.
It's my pleasure.
We hope you can come back very soon.
Absolutely.
And if you like this episode of Roughly Chinese, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned for our next episodes. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
大家好，我是主播周玉琴。很多的朋友告诉我们，选择原版的太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌。它添加有羽衣甘蓝，健康再加分。而有睡眠困扰的朋友们，赶快选择蓝色包装这一款晚安加强版，绝对是更有感。每日克菲尔，时刻美好 ，Good Feel Good， 请上快点购为健康下单，而且要记得输入推荐代码，有额外的折扣优惠。太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌基础版、晚安加强版，新包装改版，内容不变，抽取更方便。要吃就吃最好的。